Our Atlanta Hawks are officially out of the 2021 NBA playoffs. What a crazy ride it's been, but like all good things, it must come to an end. And unfortunately for our Atlanta Hawks, the clock finally struck midnight on this Cinderella story. Not the result we were hoping for, but I promise you guys, this is just the beginning. What is going on, Hawks Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Hawks Fan TV. I'm your host, AC. Hope you guys are having a great day out there so far. But man, what a crazy, wild postseason run that our Atlanta Hawks just had. It was a crazy run, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. But unfortunately for our Hawks, the magical run ended this past weekend in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals, going down 4-2 to the Milwaukee Bucks. Typically, I like to do these videos the night of the game, right after or the day after. But given the results and the fact that we were knocked out of the postseason, I needed a few days to just recuperate my thoughts, reflect on everything that we just experienced these past 4 or 5 weeks. And just honestly reset and recharge. Being a diehard Hawks fan like myself, and I'm sure a lot of you folks can relate, it takes a mental toll on your mind, body, and spirit. That's just the ebb and flows of watching your team make a deep postseason run, that emotional roller coaster that you go through. Watching your team it takes a toll. So I needed a few days to recharge, but I'm back at it again with another video. And as you can see by the title, this is a kind of a 2021 postseason recap of our Hawks. Now joining me today, I have a very special guest. He is one of the main contributors for the PeachtreeHoops.com website. If you don't know what that is, I would highly recommend checking it out. But joining me today, I have Andrew Kelly. Andrew, welcome to Hawks Fan TV. How you doing, sir?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Appreciate you carving out the time today. Man, Andrew, we just witnessed the greatest postseason run in Atlanta Hawks history. Not the result we wanted, but a lot of good things that can be built on from what we just experienced. Before we really dive into the video here, I just want to get your thoughts, Andrew. How are you feeling after this postseason? And yeah, just tell me how you're feeling. Talk to me.
You mentioned in your introduction how it takes like a mental toll, and I do agree with that. Like when you're having to watch a high stakes game, every other day, I think it definitely kind of fatigues you in a way to where in some ways, of course you want to keep winning, you want it to go on, but there's also like some relief that you don't have to keep living and dying with this. I think that definitely takes a toll, and it just makes you more, I guess, empathetic for the players too, because having to play every other day like that in such a high stakes environment, I can only imagine like how much fatigue they have from that. So obviously they can take a lot of pride in what they did. They went further than anyone thought that they would. I had them as a clear favorite to beat New York, so I was not really surprised by that. They did it faster than I expected, but the second round series against Philly, going into Game 7, I just did not feel good. I thought Game 6 was really like their closeout opportunity at home, and when that passed by, I thought, okay, it's been a fun run. They'll probably go out in Game 7, and they can build on that, but to make it to the conference finals out of nowhere, at least going into the season, I don't think many people expected that. So that was obviously extremely impressive, and the way they did it with so many contributions from young guys was even more impressive. And so they have an opportunity to return essentially the same team next season and build on that. So yeah, it was a really fun postseason run, definitely the best in their history, and gave us a lot of memories.
Yeah, I completely agree. And literally going into that Game 7 in Philly, when we lost that Game 6, I was so depressed, and it just took such a toll on me, because I remember I was at one of my buddies' houses. We were watching the game, and after the game ended, all my friends were like, dude, why are you freaking out? We still have another game to play. And I'm like, no, this was the time to close. And we needed to win Game 6 on our home court. And just like you, I was not feeling all that confident going into Game 7 on the road against a more experienced team. But yeah, it was definitely a pleasant surprise watching that game, and the fact that we came out with the W. That was amazing. literally before the playoffs started, Andrew, obviously there was a lot of fans that had some high hopes going into the postseason. A lot of fans just looking on Twitter and just the Atlanta Hawks subreddit group thought that maybe we would just make the playoffs and make it competitive in round one, and that would be a win. Some people thought we would go to round two and lose. Most people thought we were going to definitely not make the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, I will say I am going to toot my own horn a little bit. I went on record saying that we were going to actually make the Eastern Conference Finals. I posted that in the Hawks subreddit group like 230 days ago. But although I did say we would be a top 4 seed, I was one off on that prediction. But yeah, on paper, I had a lot of confidence going into the season. What were your expectations right before the playoffs started? Where did you think we were going to get bounced? How far did you think we were going to go? Yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, going in, I really liked the matchup with New York, and I know that they had lost all 3 games against them, but when you looked at the talent disparity, I thought it was pretty clear that Atlanta had a better team. Obviously, we know Madison Square Garden's an incredible environment, so I thought that would have an effect with them having home court. I thought it would go longer than it did, but really from the opening game, you could just see like Atlanta clearly had the better wings. You know, if you look at New York's roster, they have a lot of guys who are good at certain things on the wing, like they're good shooters or they're a good defender, but they had little that combined everything into a coherent package like Atlanta has. Like when they have Bogdanovich who can dribble, pass, and shoot, Herder who can do the same. It's just a more appealing skill set, and that was a huge advantage in that series. And obviously Randall didn't play well. I mean, I don't have to really go into that. But the talent disparity was just really apparent between them, so I was pretty confident they would beat the Knicks. The second series was really tough. I actually did pick them to win that series, but my reasoning was kind of wrong. Like, going into the series, you know, it came out that Embiid was playing on a torn meniscus, so I thought, like, okay, he's got a torn meniscus. He's not going to play, you know, the first game or two of the series, so Atlanta can maybe get an early advantage, and then he probably won't look the same. And that ended up not being correct. I think he averaged, like, 30 and 13 or something wild like that.
He did.
So that was not real. My reasoning wasn't correct, but I did end up being right there. But the thing with that series, too, was like Danny Green went down early, and that was their only two-way wing that they had. You know, Seth Curry's a good shooter, not a good defender. Korkmaz has some offensive talent, not a good defender. So they just had like a lot of one-way kind of guys. Thibault is a good defender, not a good offensive player. And so that really swung like the wing advantage to Atlanta, even if they were limited without Hunter and Bogdan was playing through an injury. And they had that big lineup that they kind of figured out earlier in the series where they started playing Gallinari and Collins and Capella together. And that was really interesting because it always gave them a favorable cross match when they had Herder on Curry. And they just abused that matchup, you know, most notably in Game 7. So I think that was really the key innovation of the series, was going to more of a big lineup. So I felt good, you know, about that series for them, you know, going in. And then, you know, it became a little bit more pessimistic when it was clear that Embiid was, you know, he looked himself. But Milwaukee I didn't like. I did pick the Bucks in 6 to win that one. I just thought that their length would give them trouble. Their interior defense would give them trouble. I mean, obviously Giannis went down, but they adjusted well to it. So it kind of played out how I expected for the most part, with the exception of the Philly series where I didn't see Embiid being himself.
Yeah, great points. And it's a damn shame, Andrew, because like going into that Bucks series, I was very confident. Regardless of what happened to Giannis, you know, before the series started, I thought we were going to win in 7. And still, I will die on this hill. If Trae Young, if he was 100% and that freak accident in Game 3 never occurred, I still think we would have won that series. And then, of course, if DeAndre Hunter was available, I definitely think we win that series. But that's neither here nor there.
Hunter was the big loss, especially in that series.
It was terrible. He could have been on Middleton or Drew Holiday. It wouldn't have mattered. Like, he's such a versatile defender. But yeah, of course, with that, and especially Giannis going down, after I saw how they adjusted in Game 4, I actually came to the conclusion that, you know, Giannis being off the court actually makes the Bucks play better collectively as a team, which is a weird thing to say, and especially if you're a casual NBA fan, you might say, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense. Giannis is a MVP type of player, but that usually, that NBA math doesn't always equate to wins or losses. Like, in my opinion, just because you lose your best player on paper doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose the series. And I think it was apparent this past series because Brook Lopez operated down in the paint, which is where he's more comfortable in. Chris Middleton had more opportunities, and it just freed up the lanes for the entire Bucks players.
It shifted things around, and then they're just a more experienced team.
Exactly.
Middleton and Drew Holiday have been good for so long. Brook Lopez is the franchise leading scorer for the Nets, and he's been good for a long time. Portis had a great series. Just a lot of guys that are more experienced. So that was kind of the key there.
Yeah, and I will admit I was very surprised by Drew and Chris Middleton. Like all my whole life, I kind of bashed on Chris Middleton, thinking he was just kind of a complimentary player, to Giannis because Giannis got all the attention. But man, he showed up and he showed out for sure. But man, it's a shame that we just didn't have a healthy team because I think we would have won. However, there's still a lot to be excited about in the future. Reflecting on this postseason, Andrew, there was, like I mentioned in the intro, there were a lot of highs, a lot of lows. But from everything that we witnessed, what was your favorite, if you could pinpoint one moment, what was your favorite kind of postseason moment that we saw from these Hawks?
I think the best single moment was like the Trey silencer in New York. Like that was like the most memorable overall. I think kind of like favorite game, I guess, or just like favorite performance, I guess, was like Herter in Game 7, just because that was sort of like, I don't know, it kind of represented a milestone for him. Just the way he aggressively attacked that matchup with Curry. He just never really backed down from it, and the way they trusted him to do so. I think that was really like the most. That's the thing, like the one moment. If I had to pick one, then I gotta go Trey. Like I'll remember that for a long time. But there's just also like Herter's performance in Game 7 to get him to the conference finals was so big. It's hard to go away from that.
You're in my mind, and it's freaking me out because I literally was going to say the exact same thing. Like my favorite all-time moment this postseason was Game 1 in round 1 against the Knicks.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because like 90% of the national media and writers basically picked the Knicks to win. There was maybe like 2 or 3 people I saw on ESPN and CBS and things like that actually picked the Hawks, which is still crazy to me because on paper, we're way more talented. But man, that Game 1 in Madison Square Garden, first game for the Knicks in the playoffs in like a decade. This is the first time we've been back in like 3 or 4 years. And I think that moment was really the birth and kind of the genesis of the superstar that we got to see unfold, which is Trae Young. And I think that was really his moment and, chapter 1 of his story that's just beginning. And that was by far, I'm getting chills just talking about it again and thinking it. And like you said, Game 7 against the Sixers, that was just huge because, I mean, it took us to the Eastern Conference Finals. No one had us winning that game, myself included. I thought that was the end of our Hawks, but man, that was a crazy, crazy moment. Was there any point in this playoffs where you thought to yourself, oh my God, our Hawks could actually win it all this year? Did you have that coming to Jesus moment, or did you think that ultimately we were going to lose to the Bucks?
I did think that they were going to lose to the Bucks after Giannis went down. I thought that he was going to miss the rest of the series, and I thought that Trey had I knew he would miss some time, but I thought he would come back, and so I did think that there was an opening too, but to get to the finals. But I never thought that they were going to win just because of the Suns. I didn't think they really had a good shot to beat them. Just Chris Paul and Booker, and they're just such a deep team. There's no bad players in their rotation, and they've had the benefit of the injury luck. This year. I mean, the defining characteristic of these playoffs has just been all the major injuries, obviously. And the Suns have really, they've been fortunate there. I know Chris Paul was banged up for a little while too, but they've been fortunate there and they've seized their opportunity. So there was never really a point where I thought, they can win it all. But I did think that they had, after Giannis went down, I thought they did have an opening to get to the finals. But of course, Trey was not the same. And the rest of the team was just, the experience, like I said earlier, was just such a big factor for the Bucks. So I thought they had an opening after Giannis, but I never felt at one point that they were going to win the title as much as I would like to believe so. But yeah, I did think they had a good chance after Giannis went down.
Wow, well, I must admit you're a much more level-headed fan than I am, Andrew, because after Game 7 of the Sixers, and then especially after Game 1 in Milwaukee, how we just dominated them in every fashion, I said to myself, this honestly could be the year. Like we're gonna go to the NBA Finals, and who knows what happens then.
And it did line up for them like pretty favorably too, because they didn't have to play like Durant, they didn't have to play LeBron or Curry or Kawhi. So it's like it did kind of line up in a favorable way. I agree with that.
Exactly. Like I said to myself, like we're the team of destiny. Like it would have made for such a great fairy tale, and just like honestly, Hollywood couldn't have scripted it better because you have the Suns, you got Devin Booker, first year in the playoffs, and going into the season, like Trae Young and Devin Booker both were like labeled as they're just empty stats guys, they can't get wins, and then here we have we have Trae Young and Book first ever year in the playoffs, and they're just showing out, and I honestly thought it was going to be them two in the finals just going at it toe for toe. But yeah, it's unfortunate that we lost to the Bucks. And yeah, I honestly thought we had a chance because if we would have beaten the Bucks, I actually favored us over the Suns because I thought this was the NBA Finals. Like I just thought the Bucks had a better team, better roster, more well coached, and it's just a shame because I honestly think we should have been playing the Suns last night. Like that should have been us, but I don't want to get too much into woulda, shoulda, coulda. Before I let you go, Andrew, looking ahead, after what we've just witnessed, greatest postseason run in Atlanta Hawks franchise history since, of course, moving to Atlanta, 2 games away from the NBA Finals. Where do you see this team in the future? Do you think that this was kind of the coming out party for our Hawks, and is this a stepping stone into us becoming kind of the perennial powerhouse for the next 6-7 years, or do you think we regress a little bit? Like, what are your thoughts on the outlook of this team moving forward?
Well, I think big picture-wise, they're clearly in a very good position. When you look at the talent level, how many guys are 23 and under? I mean, Trae, Collins, Hunter, Herder, Reddish, Okongwu, all those guys are 23 and under. So we just look at that as like the most basic principle. Like they're clearly in a very good shape. And then they have flexible contracts with other guys. Like Bogdan's clearly a good contract. Pella is a plus contract. They have guys that they could shift around if they needed to. So they're very, very much in a good spot. That doesn't mean that I'm necessarily predicting them to go to the conference finals again next year because we just don't know how that is going to operate. They could get a very tough, second round draw, first round draw, and they could go out earlier than expected. So you can't predict how, the playoffs are going to go for like the next year or two. It's just possible they will take a step back in terms of playoff success. But as far as like the long-term roster, it's very favorable. Like when you look at what Trae did this year, Herder, he started to really push things, started to really pull things together over the last couple of months of the season. He'd always kind of had those flashes, but he really does have a valuable skill set. Like the ability to dribble, pass, and shoot like he does, to link up play. He showed more aggression as a scorer. He improved a ton as a defender. They relied on him a ton on both sides of the ball going into the second round when Hunter was ruled out. And then Hunter, at the start of the season, he was really their most consistent player. Like he was a true two-way forward. He's improved a lot, scoring in isolation, scoring from mid-range. So I think there's a lot to like there. Obviously, we saw Reddish in the conference finals. He was thrown in with no preparation really at all. Like he had that long injury and didn't get any game time. So my expectations for him were very low going into that, just because he had no real time to practice and everything. But he looked so impressive. The defense stood out. He clearly has added more core strength. I think he looked bigger. He looked more like a 4 to me. So when you start to look at the talent, I mean, as you mentioned, Okongwu too, just because he guarded both Giannis and Embiid one-on-one pretty well. You can see his help instincts. You can see the touch he has from short mid-range, how he could expand out to the three-point line, how he might add passing to his skill set. So it's a really promising young core, and I think that they might have the best case for like the best talent in the league, 23 and under. They probably do, like the more I think about it. So they're in a very good position. It's just going to come down to, how they're able to keep everybody together if they are. Obviously, they're looking at being a luxury tax team in order to make that happen. They'll have to make sure that they continue to get good veterans. They need to get a better backup point guard, I think, next season. They need to continue to draft well. But overall, the position is very good. Like they have a great outlook. Very few teams would, not want to be in the Hawks situation. So I'm very optimistic about the future, I guess, is like the way that I would put it.
Yeah, 100% spot on. And yeah, with this young core, like you mentioned, all being 23 and under, at least the main guys are 23 and under, we definitely have a lot of flexibility. I know the big question going into the offseason, and we're not going to get it too much in this video, but just real quick, what are your thoughts on John Collins? Do you think we re-sign him? Is he gonna ask for a max? Are we gonna sign and trade him? What's your opinion?
I think he's most likely going to be back. Just, with the playoff run, they went so deep. It's hard to not want to bring a player back that they control. I think the only obstacle is just the number, essentially. There's some teams that have cap space, like San Antonio. Depending on what they do with their cap holds, they could create upwards of $50 million in cap space. And so that would obviously generate enough money for a max offer. If they were to sign onto a max offer sheet, that would put Atlanta in a tough spot because that's 25% of your cap. So you're paying $30+ million over the second half of that deal per year, and that's tough. So I think anything short of a max, even if it's not something that Atlanta particularly wants to do, I think that they'll generally match. Like if you look at Jaylen Brown's deal, I think he's like 4 for 105, 107, something like that. So a little over $25 million a year. I think that's fine to pay for Collins. And then they could develop some guys behind him too. So they would be like, you could develop Okongwu for the long term. And then, eventually if a trade opportunity comes around, then you could move him to the starting lineup, trade Capello. Maybe you could use Collins in a deal to get like a star. So I think as long as it's not like a max offer, then they're likely to bring him back. If it's a max, then I think it's like 50-50.
Yeah, that's the conundrum that we're in right now, and I think that's going to be on the minds of every Hawks fan until that deal is done. And yeah, I'm excited. I trust in Travis Schlenk, so hopefully he and JC's camp can come to an agreement. And also, there's this like misconception that John Collins wants a max. He's never actually physically said on record that he is a max player. Obviously, he knows his worth. He wants to get the most money possible, but he doesn't strike me as the type of guy that just is greedy for money. And maybe I don't know how exactly being a restricted free agent works, but let's say a team like Dallas or San Antonio wants to give him, $30 million a year. Does he have the right to like deny that and just sign for a lower amount, or basically?
Well, he can sign for what he wants. But basically, the way restricted will work is that they can let Collins go out in free agency. They offered him the qualifying offer, so that way they retain the rights to match anything, and then they can send him out to negotiate with other teams. And that's what the Kings did with Bogdanovich last year. And then a team could say, "Hey, we're going to sign you to an offer sheet for 120 million." And then the Hawks will have a period of time in which they have to match that deal. So that's essentially how it will work. He could take less if he wanted to, just not negotiate with other teams. The Hawks can make him an offer right out of the free agency that's agreeable to both sides, and maybe he doesn't meet with other teams and he just takes that off the bat. But more likely he'll probably get an offer sheet from another team. It just kind of depends. If like I said, if San Antonio offers a max deal, which is 25% of your salary cap for a second contract player, then it's going to be more difficult for Atlanta because they'll have to consider the long-term ramifications for that. If we match a max deal for Collins, are we going to be able to pay Herter? Are we going to be able to pay Hunter and some of these other guys that are going to be due for money in the future? So that sort of complicates things. So I think it's really anything sort of a max offer, I think that they will match. But if it goes all the way up to that, then that's where I'm not confident. That's when it starts to become more dicey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love John Collins. Like he's one of my favorite Hawks. I hope he stays in a Hawks uniform until he retires. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is a business. And when I look at this young core of Trey, DeAndre, Cam, Kevin Huerter, Okongwu, unfortunately, I think Collins is definitely the odd man out, and he's the most expendable piece. And yeah, we could even move DeAndre at the 4. I don't know how well Double O is going to do at the 4, considering he has no perimeter jump shot.
He's a 5. I mean, if he was playing with like a guy like Towns or someone like that, then.
But he's so undersized that he'll just get bullied by bigger centers, and we saw a little bit of that this postseason. Like I honestly don't know how effective a 6'8" center in the NBA is, to be honest.
Well, there's some risk with it. I mean, he's not a lot shorter than like Bam Adebayo. You can definitely make it work, and he's such a smart help defender that there's a lot of advantages for that because of his mobility. So like it's easier to defend at the level of the screen and to switch and to do things like that and to play versatile coverages. Like there's a lot of advantages that come with that because of his mobility, but clearly it's going to impact him in some areas like rim protection or defending like Joel Embiid one-on-one, which I actually thought he did better than I expected him to do.
He really did.
Giannis, one-on-one. I mean, those are as tough as it gets, for one-on-one assignments for the most part, other than like, Durant or someone. And he did, an admirable job there. So I think there's some advantages, but yeah, he's small. Like there's no getting around that. There's going to be disadvantages with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last question, Andrew, just because I love him. He's maybe like my second favorite player after Trey, but Cam Reddish, you alluded to a little bit earlier. We saw that breakout performance in Game 6, and really from the moment he stepped on the court, he was just an X factor. Do you see him as the future 2 or the future 3?
Are you asking like as far as like position or like priority?
Position. Yep.
Okay, position. I think probably you don't see a lot of like 6'8", 6'9" guys play the 2, so I don't think that I see him there. I think with more development, as Herder starts to develop, he could kind of take over for Bogdan down the line. It's lined up pretty well, because Bogdan will be going to his age 29 season next year. Herder will be going to his age 23 season. So you could kind of hand the baton eventually from Bogdan to Herder as the starting 2. One thing that I think is interesting about Reddish is there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about like his growth spurt and how true that is or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's clearly gotten stronger. I don't know how tall he is right now.
6'10", baby, 6'10".
6'10". He looks about like 6'9" to me. He's probably around the same size as Paul George and Jason Tatum.
Yeah, he's huge.
And both those guys are capable of playing the 4. So I think looking down the line, you could look at him as like the 4 of the future. So you could start both him and Hunter and Herder all at the same time down the line. So if they weren't. Maybe they, move Collins at some point. Maybe they don't bring him back. Maybe you could look at, Reddish as sort of your 4 of the future. So you could start Trey at the 1, Herder at the 2, DeAndre at the 3 or the 4. They're kind of interchangeable between those 2, and then Okongwu at the 5. And that would give you a ton of versatility. They give you 3 guys that can, play on and off ball. You just get a lot of options with that kind of lineup. So I don't think he's going to be a 2. It's either the 3 or the 4, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, that's like my dream scenario, like having all 4 of those guys in the starting lineup if they all pan out, which Trey obviously is there. I think DeAndre definitely is up and coming, and it's unfortunate that he got injured.
Yeah, it is.
And it's surprising you said we could see Cam at the 4, because a lot of people, myself included, think DeAndre is going to be that 4 just because he's a lot.
They're interchangeable. I mean, the main obstacle is like rebounding. Like neither are very good rebounders. Although I thought that Reddish did contribute more than I expected on the boards. I mean, the size really helps. He's clearly gotten bigger. But you see guys like Jay Crowder playing the 4 now, Tobias Harris. Like those are guys that aren't really different size-wise from Cam and DeAndre. So they're kind of interchangeable. I mean, it effectively wouldn't matter much, who's at the 3 or the 4, just because they're both forward spots and they can kind of move in and out. But either of those guys, I think, are really interesting if they're the 3 and the 4 of the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Andrew, it was a pleasure having you on. First time talking to you, and love your insight. I came across your Twitter feed or your Twitter profile just on the timeline randomly, and loved your takes, loved the thought-provoking tweets that you had, and that's what I like. I like people that make me think, make me ponder, and that's what you do. So it was a pleasure having you on. Hopefully we can have you on a few more episodes down the line, but appreciate the time, and here's to hopefully another Eastern Conference or Finals run next year.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Take it easy.
You too.
All right, so we heard it, fellas. That was 2021 postseason recap of our Atlanta Hawks. As you can see on the screen here, we're just running some old highlights, going down memory lane, some of the best moments that we were able to witness and experience. Man, the shot was crazy right here by Clint behind the back. But guys, it was an absolute pleasure talking to Andrew, so big shout out to him. Follow him on Twitter. I'll link his Twitter profile in the description below. But yeah, Hawks Nation, we're just getting started, and follow and like and subscribe to this channel if you like Hawks content like this. I will be posting off-season videos up until October when the season starts up again. And yeah, I'm looking forward to another exciting season. And thank you for watching, and let's go Hawks, baby.